The wine. It always starts with the wine. Not the vintage nor the ruby allure that Marcus so artfully praised as he poured it, but the acrid metallic tang that now clings stubbornly to the back of my tongue, a grim souvenir of betrayal. It's a taste I remember with chilling clarity, a flavor that once preceded darkness, confusion, and the cold, indifferent walls of an institution. But this time, there's a difference, a crucial universe altering difference. This time, as Marcus's voice, a masterpiece of feigned panic and manufactured concern, crackles on the phone to the 911 operator, I am not succumbing to the oblivion he so carefully orchestrated. This time, I'm wide awake, a silent, unwilling audience to my own meticulously staged downfall, trapped within the heavy, unresponsive shell of my own body. His words, each syllable laced with calculated deceit, echo in the opulent bedroom we once shared, now a theater for his treachery. My wife, Ilara, she's not herself. I think she's had some sort of breakdown. Hysterical, threatening things. The lies spill out, smooth and practiced, painting a picture of a woman unhinged, a narrative designed to strip me of credibility, of sanity, of freedom, just like before. The chilling repetition of it all, the horrifying deja vu, sends a tremor through my paralyzed limbs that only I can feel. He's following the old script, page by page, oblivious to the fact that the lead actress has already lived through this tragedy and is now back for an encore, armed with the original playwright's notes. A cold dread, sharp and familiar, tries to claw its way up from the pit of my stomach, threatening to engulf me. It's the dread of helplessness, of being a marionette whose strings are pulled by a malicious puppeteer. But beneath it, a new sensation, fierce and unfamiliar from my last disastrous performance in this life, surges, a burning, incandescent resolve. It's the fire of foreknowledge, the steely determination of a woman who has already seen the final act and refuses to let it play out the same way. They think they're winning. Marcus, with his carefully modulated distress, and Chloe, his shadow, his accomplice, no doubt waiting just out of sight, ready to play her supporting role in this charade. They believe they are pushing me towards the abyss. They have no idea they are the ones walking directly into my meticulously planned retribution, a snare I've been setting since the moment I gasped my first disbelieving breath back into this timeline. The wail of sirens, distant at first, now slices through the tense quiet of the house, growing louder, closer. It's a perverse countdown, each rise and fall in pitch marking the seconds slipping away. Paramedics. They'll be here soon, their arrival heralding the next phase of Marcus's plan. The gurney, the sympathetic but firm hands, the inevitable sedation that will truly silence me. I have until they assess me, until they officially declare me a danger to myself or others, based on Marcus's poisoned testimony and whatever evidence he's planted. Less than an hour by my frantic internal calculation. An hour to ensure the first critical seed of their undoing is sown. An hour to turn their weapon back on them. Marcus continues his performance, dabbing at dry eyes, his voice thick with false emotion for the benefit of the dispatcher on the other end of the line. He's so confident, so assured in his deception. He doesn't know, he can't possibly know that the person listening to his lies, the unseen, unheard dispatcher meticulously logging his every word, his every carefully timed pause and inflection, is about to become my first unwitting piece of evidence. He thinks he's dialing 911 to report a crazy woman. He has no idea he's actually dialing the first digits of his own indictment. And this time, I'll make sure the call connects. The paramedics, bless their well-meaning but currently misguided souls, were everything Marcus could have hoped for, efficient, concerned, and completely buying his performance of the distraught husband. I felt the prick of a needle in my arm, a preliminary sedative undoubtedly, and a fresh wave of panic, cold and sharp, threatened to shatter my fragile composure. My window was closing, the drug already beginning to dull the ragged edges of my heightened awareness, trying to drag me into a fog I couldn't afford to enter. I needed to act now, before they bundled me onto that gurney and Marcus's victory was cemented with the click of ambulance doors. Feigning a brief, almost imperceptible flicker of lucidity amidst the drug-induced lethargy, I forced my eyes to focus, my lips to move. The words were a desperate, slurred whisper, barely audible above Marcus's solicitous murmurs to the medical team. Lawyer need Ben Holloway. It was a gamble. Would they listen? Would they dismiss it as the ramblings of a woman already halfway to clinical hysteria, as per her husband's tearful report? For a heart-stopping moment, nothing. Then, one of the paramedics, a younger woman with kind eyes, paused. She looked from me to Marcus, a tiny frown creasing her brow. Did she say lawyer? Marcus was instantly at her side, his hand on her arm, his voice dripping with false sorrow. Oh, she gets these fixations. Ben Holloway is an old family friend, but hardly relevant now. Please, we just need to get her help. But the seed was planted. The paramedic exchanged a quick, uncertain glance with her colleague. Before Marcus could further dismiss it, before the sedative could fully claim me, the chime of the doorbell echoed through the house, sharp and authoritative. Rescue, right on schedule. Ben Holloway, my bulldog of a lawyer, my ace in the hole, stood framed in the doorway, his presence radiating a calm competence that immediately shifted the atmosphere in the room. He wasn't just an old family friend. He was the one person I'd briefed, albeit cryptically, based on the nightmarish foreknowledge of my previous truncated life. He knew something was going to happen tonight, and he was prepared. His sharp gaze took in the scene. Me, pale and visibly drugged on the chaise lounge, Marcus hovering with overplayed concern, the paramedics with their gurney at the ready. Mr. Vale, Ben's voice was cool, cutting through Marcus's anxious fussing. I believe my client, Ms. Ilara Vance, requested my presence. He emphasized my maiden name, a small but significant barb. He then produced a document with a flourish, handing it to the lead paramedic and a copy to a suddenly very still Marcus. This is a legally binding injunction pre-signed by Ms. Vance, expressly forbidding any medical treatment or transportation without her explicit, unimpaired consent or my direct consultation. It also names me as her sole decision-maker in the event she is deemed temporarily incapacitated. The effect was instantaneous. The paramedics halted, looking to Marcus for guidance, then back to the formidable document in their hands. Marcus's face, moments before a mask of worried solicitude, went rigid. A vein throbbed at his temple. The air crackled. My first decisive action, launched from the depths of my chemically induced helplessness, had landed. As the paramedics made a strategic, if slightly confused, retreat to their ambulance to consult with the hospital's legal team, Marcus cornered Ben in the grand hallway, his voice a low, furious hiss. The polished marble underfoot seemed to absorb none of his heat. What in God's name do you think you're doing, Holloway? She's a danger to herself. This is a medical emergency, not a legal circus. His expensive suit seemed to strain over his shoulders as he bristled with indignation. Ben, impeccably calm, didn't even blink. He adjusted his tie, a small, deliberate movement that seemed to infuriate Marcus further. A medical emergency that conveniently arises just as you were planning to discuss dissolving your joint assets, perhaps, he countered, his tone mild, but his eyes like chips of ice. If Ilara is indeed a danger to herself, Marcus, then you certainly won't object to a truly independent psychiatric evaluation, arranged by my office, conducted by specialists with no prior connection to either of you. And while we're at it, Ben's voice dropped, becoming even more precise. Full disclosure of all recent financial activities, say, over the last 6 months, both personal and corporate. Standard procedure in cases where a person's mental state might be exploited. The implication hung heavy in the air between them, as tangible as the scent of lilies Chloe always favored. A scent I now noticed clinging faintly to Marcus's lapel. Marcus stared, momentarily speechless, his carefully constructed narrative facing its first serious challenger. He knew Ben wasn't just fishing, he was aiming directly at the rotten core of his scheme. Later, after Marcus had grudgingly agreed to Ben's terms for the independent evaluation, what choice did he have, with the injunction now a very real obstacle? Ben managed a few precious moments alone with me. I was propped up in my own guest room, the effects of the initial sedative slowly receding, leaving behind a bone deep weariness but a fierce, burning clarity. He didn't waste time. His expression was grave as he discreetly showed me his phone. On the screen was a photograph. It was of me, or rather, a horrifyingly convincing deepfake of me, in a staged, compromising situation. Disheveled, a bottle of pills artfully spilled beside a slumped figure, eyes wild and unfocused. The timestamp on the image, Ben explained, showed Marcus had received it via an untraceable messaging app mere moments before he dialed 911. My breath hitched. This wasn't just about making me seem unstable enough to control my finances or seize my company shares. This was a frame-up, meticulously planned, designed to utterly destroy me, perhaps even to implicate me in something far more sinister they had covered up. The faked photo was the evidence Marcus intended for the police to discover later, cementing his story of my violent, drug-fueled breakdown. My blood ran cold. The stakes were even higher than I'd remembered from the fragmented nightmares of my past life. They weren't just trying to silence me. They were trying to erase me and replace me with a monster of their own making. Despite Ben's intervention, the system, once set in motion, had its own momentum. The hospital, acting on the initial paramedic report and Marcus's still influential assertions, insisted on a mandatory 72-hour observation period. I was transferred not to the luxurious private clinic Marcus had no doubt envisioned, but to a secure wing of the City General Hospital, a place of sterile corridors and the constant quiet hum of institutional despair. Ben fought it, but it was the best he could do on short notice against Marcus's powerful legal team, who were already swarming. From my small, impersonal room with its barred window overlooking a bleak courtyard, the pressure mounted. Marcus, Ben informed me via a secure call, was already aggressively petitioning the courts for an emergency conservatorship, citing my clear mental instability and imminent danger to the family estate. The 72-hour clock was ticking with an almost audible menace. I had to discredit him, expose him, before I was legally gagged and buried under the weight of his lies. The fight had just begun, and I was already behind enemy lines. While the sterile white walls of my hospital room pressed in, a different scene was unfolding across town. Marcus Vale, freshly showered and changed out of the suit he'd worn for his performance of the concerned husband, settled into the plush, cream-colored leather passenger seat of Chloe Thorne's sleek Tesla. The car glided silently through the glittering veins of the city, a stark, almost insulting contrast to the cold dread and chemical-induced paralysis that had gripped me only a few hours prior. Rain had begun to fall, smearing the vibrant neon lights across the windshield into abstract streaks of color, a kaleidoscope mirroring the shattered pieces of the life Marcus was so intent on destroying. The interior of the car was warm, cocoon-like, the subtle scent of Chloe's expensive perfume, something sharp and floral, so unlike the antiseptic aroma that now filled my own nostrils, a comforting familiarity to him. Chloe, her blonde hair expertly tousled, a smug, satisfied curl to her lips, navigated the wet streets with an easy confidence. She reached over and gave Marcus's knee a reassuring squeeze, her touch lingering perhaps a fraction too long. See, I told you it would go smoothly. A few more days, that psychiatric evaluation will confirm what you've sadly suspected for months, and then control, complete control. She flashed him a triumphant smile, then deftly swiped her thumb across the large touchscreen display in the center console, pulling up a news article. The headline screamed, "Councilman Davies takes indefinite leave amidst personal crisis. Sources cite severe psychological strain." A grainy photo of a haggard, broken-looking man accompanied the text. "Councilman Davies," Chloe said, her voice laced with self-congratulation. "Remember him? His wife was problematic. Resisted the inevitable. Now she's got nothing, and he's free to pursue his ambitions. A perfect template, wouldn't you agree? Alara will be yesterday's news, even faster, a tragic footnote." Marcus managed a smirk, the image of Davies, a man whose downfall he and Chloe had subtly engineered as a practice run for a much larger prize, indeed bringing a sliver of satisfaction. Ilara, for all her supposed brilliance in business, was proving just as susceptible to a well-crafted narrative of female hysteria. His plan, years in the making, was finally coming to fruition. Then, his phone buzzed in his jacket pocket. An alert from his private bank. He frowned, pulling it out. A notification flashed across the screen. Charitable donation processed. $2,500,000 unloaded to the Phoenix Women's Shelter. His blood pressure spiked. $2.5 million. Gone. Ilara. It had to be Ilara? He remembered her mentioning some large anonymous pledge she wanted to make from their joint charity fund, something he dismissed as one of her fleeting philanthropic whims. He'd assumed his actions tonight would freeze everything long before such a sum could move. Clearly, she'd set it up as an automatic, timed transfer, a final act of defiance from the edge of her impending abyss. A flicker of genuine unease, cold and sharp, pierced through his celebratory mood. The amount wasn't catastrophic, not yet, but it was a complication. A sign that Ilara, even drugged and supposedly breaking down, was still capable of lashing out. Problem? Chloe asked, glancing at his suddenly thunderous expression. He waved a dismissive hand, though the muscle in his jaw tightened. Just Ilara, making a nuisance of herself even now. That ridiculous donation she was babbling about went through. Chloe laughed, a brittle sound. Oh, please, pocket change for you, darling. She actually thought she could outsmart us with that? That little prenup stunt Holloway tried to wave in your face earlier won't save her when she's officially declared mentally incompetent. The real win, Marcus, the only thing that matters, is controlling her shares in Vale Industries. Once those are yours, she can donate her pocket money to every stray cat in the city for all I care. Marcus grunted, partially mollified. Chloe was right, of course. The shares were the endgame. Everything else was just noise. Still, he mused, his gaze returning to the rain-lashed city beyond the window. That lawyer of hers, Holloway, he's like a damn terrier. Then a more pressing concern surfaced. What about that 911 dispatch log? You said your contact at emergency services would handle any potential flags. Make sure it all aligned perfectly with my statement. Chloe exuded confidence, reaching for her vape pen. Relax, Marcus. It's being edited for clarity as we speak. My guy is a magician with digital records, and he'll trim any ambiguities, ensure the transcript reflects a concerned husband and an increasingly erratic wife. Standard procedure. No one will question the official record once he's done. It will be a masterpiece of sympathetic interpretation. It better be, Chloe, Marcus said, his voice low and hard, the earlier unease returning. There's too much riding on this. Every detail has to be flawless. No loose ends, no ambiguities whatsoever. He thought of the faked photo, the one that would paint Ilara as a suicidal drug abuser. That, combined with a clean 911 log, should be more than enough to seal her fate. He didn't know, couldn't possibly comprehend, that miles away, in that sterile hospital room, I was not idly waiting for my fate to be decided. The moment Ben had confirmed my 72-hour confinement, the moment he'd relayed Marcus's aggressive push for conservatorship, a cold, clear certainty had settled over me. My foreknowledge was my greatest weapon, and it was time to deploy it with surgical precision. Through Ben, who had become my unwavering right hand, my conduit to the outside world, I set my own countermove into motion. It wasn't a direct assault, not yet. That would come. This was more subtle, a carefully aimed dart dipped in the poison of truth. Ben, acting on my explicit instructions, compiled a small, meticulously curated dossier. It contained no mention of my current predicament, no hint of the 911 call or my supposed breakdown. Instead, it focused solely on Marcus Vale, specifically, a series of highly suspicious financial transactions, shell corporations, and very convenient bankruptcies linked to him, and, interestingly enough, to the recently disgraced Councilman Davies. This dossier was leaked anonymously, not to the mainstream media, not yet, but to a specific investigative journalist, Amelia Hayes, a tenacious, under-resourced reporter at a struggling city paper, known for her hunger for a career-making story and her distrust of the city's powerful elite. The tip was vague, merely suggesting that Mr. Vale's philanthropic image might conceal a far murkier reality, and that his connections to Davies might be more than circumstantial. It was just enough to pique her interest, to light the fuse. And the dispatch log? Chloe's smug confidence about her magician contact brought a grim smile to my lips when Ben relayed that particular piece of intel, gathered through his own discreet channels. Let them tamper. Let them edit and clarify to their heart's content. Because the beautiful, artfully simple cornerstone of my entire strategy was this. Hours before Marcus had even picked up the phone to dial 911, based on the chillingly precise memories of my previous life's final horrifying day, Ben had already secured a pristine, time-stamped, digitally watermarked copy of the entire unadulterated 911 call and the complete raw dispatch logs from that specific emergency services hub. He'd used a secure back-channel contact, a tech specialist indebted to him from a previous case, someone utterly untraceable and loyal. Chloe's magician could perform all the digital sleight of hand he wanted on the copy that would become the official record. It wouldn't matter, because I had the original, the truth. And when the time was right, the discrepancies between their carefully crafted fiction and the undeniable reality of that recording would be their undoing. They thought they were erasing evidence. In reality, they were creating it. Their every alteration to the log would be another nail in their own coffins. The dispatch logs weren't just going to dial their indictment. They were going to meticulously transcribe it in their own edited, incriminating handwriting. Amelia Hayes was, by her own admission, a journalistic scavenger. She picked at the bones of stories the larger papers, with their well-funded investigative teams and glossy offices, often overlooked or disdained. Her office at the City Chronicle was a cramped cubicle overflowing with precariously stacked files, old newspapers, and the lingering aroma of stale coffee and determination. The anonymous tip about Marcus Vale, pillar of the community, renowned philanthropist, husband of the recently and tragically unraveling Alara Vance, had initially landed on her virtual desk with a dismissive thud. Another disgruntled employee, perhaps? A jealous competitor? Rich people always had enemies. Vale's public image was impeccable. His legal team legendary. A direct confrontation was journalistic suicide for someone in her precarious position. Still, the name Councilman Davies, mentioned in the anonymous email Ben had so carefully crafted, snagged on a loose thread in her memory. Davies's implosion had been swift, brutal, and now that she thought about it, a little too neat. She'd idly wondered at the time if there was more to it than the official narrative of a stress-induced breakdown. The tip suggested a financial entanglement with Vale. A long shot, but Amelia had built her minor reputation on long shots. She started digging, not into Vale directly, but into the periphery of Davies' defunct businesses, his known associates, the faint financial footprints that even the best fixers sometimes fail to entirely erase. For 3 days, fueled by lukewarm coffee and an almost obsessive curiosity, she waded through digital archives, cross-referencing obscure company filings and tracing digital breadcrumbs. And then, she found it. A small, almost invisible link. A shell corporation involved in one of Davies' failed land development deals had, for a brief period, shared a director with another shell corporation that was, through several more layers of obfuscation, quietly owned by a holding company controlled by Marcus Vale. It was tenuous, circumstantial, but it was something. A flicker of interest ignited in Amelia's tired eyes. Maybe the anonymous tipster wasn't entirely unhinged. The connection to Davies, however faint, gave her just enough internal justification to pull the publicly available records on the recent Vale Vance domestic incident. Alara Vance's sudden dramatic 911 call, the subsequent hospitalization, it was all very public, very messy. Amelia requested the official 911 call audio and the corresponding dispatch logs, expecting a fairly routine, if tragic, addition to the Vale saga. It was standard procedure. A journalist needed due diligence. The police department, citing privacy but also the ongoing medical evaluation, was initially hesitant. But Amelia, citing public interest given Vale's prominence and the nature of the call, was persistent. Eventually, they released the redacted audio and the official dispatch transcript, the one Chloe's contact had so diligently clarified. As Amelia listened to Marcus Vale's distraught voice on the audio, her reporter's cynicism warred with a reluctant flicker of sympathy. He sounded genuinely distressed. The dispatch log, neat and concise, corroborated his story of a loving husband forced to take drastic action. It painted a clear picture of Alara's escalating hysteria and his desperate attempts to calm her. Everything was tidy, perhaps too tidy. That evening, another anonymous encrypted email landed in Amelia's inbox. No text this time, just an attachment, a single audio file, and a PDF document. Her heart gave a little flutter of anticipation. The audio file was, she quickly realized, another recording of the same 911 call. But this one was rawer, longer. There were subtle differences in background noise, in the dispatcher's cadence, even in Marcus's tone during certain pauses. The PDF was a different version of the dispatch log, far more detailed, filled with timestamps down to the millisecond, dispatcher shorthand, and, crucially, notations of channel switches and secondary recordings. Ben, anticipating Amelia's diligence in getting the official versions, had ensured this care package arrived at the perfect moment to highlight the contrast. Amelia spent the next 4 hours comparing the two versions line by line, timestamp by timestamp. The official log was a sanitized summary. The anonymously provided log was a messy, complex, and far more revealing document. Glaring discrepancies began to leap out. Entire phrases Marcus had uttered in the raw audio, phrases that cast his concern in a slightly different, more controlling light, were missing from the official transcript. The dispatcher's probing questions, particularly those regarding any history of domestic disputes, standard protocol yet absent from the official log, were present in the raw version. Most damningly, the raw log indicated a brief secondary call made by Marcus from the scene, its audio not included in this anonymous drop, but its existence and timing meticulously noted by the original dispatcher. The official log made no mention of any such second call. A cold knot formed in Amelia's stomach. This wasn't just sloppy record-keeping. This was active manipulation. Someone had deliberately altered the official record. Why? To protect Marcus Vale's image? Or to conceal something more sinister? The anonymous tip about Vale's financial dealings with Davies suddenly felt a lot less like a crank email and a lot more like the key to a much larger, darker story. The leverage hadn't just shifted, it had been entirely upended. The weapon Alara had foreseen, their own doctored evidence, was now primed. The next morning, Amelia Hayes picked up her phone. She dialed Marcus Vale's private office line, a number she'd wheedled out of a former disgruntled Vale employee. When his smooth, confident voice answered, she didn't waste time on pleasantries. "Mr. Vale, Amelia Hayes from the City Chronicle. I'm working on a story regarding the 911 call you made concerning your wife, Ms. Alara Vance." A slight pause. "I believe that matter is private, Ms. Hayes, and concerns my wife's health. I have no comment." His tone was clipped, dismissive. "I understand," Amelia pressed, her own voice calm but firm. "However, I've reviewed two versions of the dispatch log from that night, the official one and another more detailed version. There are significant discrepancies, Mr. Vale. For instance, the detailed log indicates a second call you made from the scene, a call not mentioned in the official record. Could you shed some light on that?" She also threw in a carefully worded question about a recent, very large charitable donation made from a joint account just prior to the 9/11 incident, gauging his reaction. The silence on the other end of the line stretched for several agonizing seconds. When Marcus finally spoke, his voice was no longer smooth or confident. It was strained, a little breathless. I don't know what you're talking about. There was only one call. My wife was extremely unwell. This is an outrageous intrusion." He stammered slightly over unwell, his denial utterly unconvincing. The panic, thinly veiled but unmistakably present, was palpable even through the phone line. He sounded like a man whose carefully constructed reality was crumbling around him. He blustered for another moment about legal action before abruptly ending the call. Amelia leaned back in her chair, a slow smile spreading across her face. Gotcha. Alara Vance, wherever she was, had anticipated this perfectly. Her unseen lawyer, Ben Holloway, had executed the plan flawlessly. Marcus Vale slammed his phone down, his hand trembling. Chloe, summoned to his office by a frantic text, found him pacing, his face pale, his usual composure shattered. She knows, he ground out, running a hand distractedly through his perfectly styled hair, disheveling it. That damn reporter, Hayes. She knows about the logs. She asked about the second call. She even mentioned the bloody donation. Chloe's smugness from the previous days had vanished, replaced by a wide-eyed alarm. How? How could she possibly know? My contacts swore the official log was airtight. I don't know how, Marcus roared, slamming his fist on his mahogany desk. But she does, and she sounded certain. The media, their once compliant tool for shaping narratives, was now sniffing around their meticulously crafted story, not with an eye to Alara's supposed instability, but with the glint of suspicion aimed squarely at them. They were no longer the concerned husband and supportive friend. They were suddenly persons of interest in a potential conspiracy, one that might involve not just perjury and obstruction of justice related to the 9/11 call, but also those murky financial dealings connected to Davies. Their foolproof plan was unraveling with terrifying speed, their controlled narrative shattered into a million incriminating pieces. The air in the opulent office suddenly felt cold, restrictive. The carefully constructed walls of their deception were showing cracks, and a very unwelcome light was beginning to stream through. They had set out to destroy Alara Vance. Now it seemed they were the ones caught in the glare. They would spend the next few days in a frantic state of damage control, consulting with their expensive lawyers, trying to plug the leaks, to discredit Amelia Hayes, to reinforce their original story. But the seeds of doubt had been sown in fertile ground. The carefully orchestrated media silence around Alara's breakdown was about to be broken by a different kind of story altogether. In a week, as the first carefully worded but deeply implicating article from Amelia Hayes hit the digital newsstands, Marcus Vale and Chloe Thorne would wish it was only Alara's sanity and a misplaced multi-million-dollar donation they had to worry about. The headline, stark and damning, would read, "Local businessman, questionable calls, and a convenient breakdown, coincidence or conspiracy." Amelia Hayes' article, "Local businessman, questionable calls, and a convenient breakdown, coincidence or conspiracy," landed like a well-aimed grenade. While it stopped short of direct accusations, the carefully juxtaposed facts, Marcus Vale's sudden 911 call, the inconsistencies in the dispatch log versions she'd alluded to, his suspicious financial ties to the disgraced Councilman Davies, and the curiously timed multi-million-dollar donation from Alara just before her episode, painted a deeply unsettling picture. The public narrative, so carefully curated by Marcus, began to fray. Questions were being asked, uncomfortable ones. The doubt Amelia had sown was a potent seed, and it was enough. Enough for the hospital's board, already wary of the Vale family's aggressive legal team and now faced with burgeoning public scrutiny, to agree to my temporary release into Ben's care, pending a truly independent and far more thorough psychiatric evaluation. Marcus's petition for emergency conservatorship was, for the moment, stalled in a mire of procedural delays and newly raised red flags. Freedom, even this tentative conditional version of it, tasted sweeter than any wine Marcus had ever poured. From the sanctuary of Ben's discreet city apartment, a place far removed from the opulent cage of my former life, I directed my second strike. It was riskier, more direct, but necessary. Amelia's article had cracked the foundations of their lies. Now it was time to send a tremor through the entire edifice. "Are you absolutely certain about this, Alara?" Ben had asked, his brow furrowed with concern as he reviewed the plan. "Releasing the actual audio of your 911 call, even the original unedited version? It's raw. It's you, terrified. They'll twist it." "Let them try," I'd responded, a cold resolve settling in my heart. "They want to paint me as hysterical? Fine. Let the world hear the hysteria Marcus Vale induced. Let them hear a woman in fear for her life, not a woman losing her mind. Context, Ben. That's our weapon now. We frame it before they can." And so we did. Ben, with his network of contacts, arranged for the original unadulterated audio of my 911 call to be exclusively featured on The Gilded Cage, one of the nation's most popular true crime podcasts, known for its deep dives into complex cases involving the wealthy and powerful. It wasn't just dropped anonymously, it was presented within a carefully constructed narrative. The podcast host, a respected journalist in her own right, framed the audio with excerpts from Amelia Hayes's article, highlighted the known discrepancies with the official police log, and featured an interview with a discreetly coached by Ben, former associate of Marcus's who spoke off the record about his volatile temper and controlling nature. My terror was audible, yes, but juxtaposed with the mounting questions about Marcus's integrity and potential manipulation, it sounded less like madness and more like a desperate plea for help from a woman ensnared. We let them air my false 911 call, false in its portrayal by Marcus, that is, but this time the story was mine. The fallout was immediate. Marcus Vale, listening to the podcast episode in the sterile silence of his high-rise office, felt a bead of sweat trace a cold path down his spine. His own voice, feigning panic, now sounded hollow, theatrical, even to his own ears. But Alara's voice, her raw, unfiltered terror, was chillingly authentic. And the host's pointed questions about the dispatch logs, about the second call Amelia Hayes had hinted at, felt like daggers. The door to his office burst open and Chloe stormed in, her face pale, her eyes wide with a frantic energy. Her usual icy composure was gone. "Marcus, have you heard this? They're playing the whole damn call. Every station, every news blog is picking it up. And that lawyer of hers, Holloway, he must be feeding them this. He's practically screaming log tampering without actually saying it." Marcus slammed his fist on the polished surface of his desk, the sound echoing the tremor in his gut. "He can't prove anything. It's just noise. Her word, her terror against mine." "Noise that's getting louder by the second," Chloe shot back, her voice cracking. "The politician's chief of staff just called me. Absolutely spooked. He's worried this will lead back to Davies, to everything." What if they connect us to that entire mess properly, Marcus? What if they find out how deep it really went? Her carefully constructed facade was crumbling, revealing the raw fear beneath. Marcus ran a hand through his hair, his mind racing. The shares. He had to secure Alara's shares in Vale Industries. It was the only way to regain control, to weather this storm. "They won't," he said, trying to project a confidence he no longer felt. "We just need to accelerate our plan for Alara's shares. Push the emergency board meeting through. Once I have full control of the company, this noise will die down. We'll have the resources to make it die down." But Alara, or rather Ben, acting as her unwavering sword and shield, was already several steps ahead. As the podcast sent shockwaves through the city's elite and the DA's office began to field an increasing number of calls demanding action, Ben delivered his next payload. He presented a comprehensive file to the lead investigators at the district attorney's office and, ensuring maximum impact, simultaneously leaked crucial components to Amelia Hayes, who was already working on her explosive follow-up. Ben provided irrefutable evidence identifying Chloe Thorne's contact at emergency services, the one tasked with handling the dispatch log. The man, a mid-level IT technician named Martin Webb, was not just some anonymous digital magician. He was a known data manipulator with a history of under-the-table work for less than scrupulous clients. More damningly, Ben's investigation had uncovered a clear financial trail linking Webb directly to a series of shell corporations controlled by Marcus Vale, payments made just days after the 911 call. Webb hadn't just been doing Chloe a favor, he'd been a hired gun, paid by Marcus to tamper with official police records. But the most devastating part of the reveal concerned the reason for the meticulous editing of the dispatch log. It wasn't just to subtly alter the narrative of Alara's mental state. Its primary purpose, Ben revealed, had been to completely scrub any mention, any trace, of that brief, secondary call Marcus had made from the scene that fateful night. And now, Ben provided what he had strategically withheld until this moment, the full, forensically authenticated audio of that second call. Alara, in her reborn state, had remembered not just the call, but the specific technical glitch in the dispatch system. a known issue with that hub's secondary recording channels during high volume periods that had allowed it to be captured, a detail Marcus and Chloe could never have anticipated. On that recording, Marcus's voice, no longer feigning distress but cold, calculating, and utterly chilling, could be heard instructing Chloe. Make sure they find the empty pill packets by her bedside, Chloe, and the letter. The story has to be airtight. No mistakes this time. It was the smoking gun. Proof of premeditation of a conspiracy to frame, to pervert the course of justice, spoken in Marcus's own voice. The effect was cataclysmic. Within hours, the district attorney's office, armed with this undeniable evidence and facing immense public pressure fueled by Amelia Hayes' second, even more explosive article detailing the cover-up, announced a formal preliminary investigation into Marcus Vail, Chloe Thorne, and their known associates. The charges being explored were serious: potential witness tampering, conspiracy to obstruct justice, subornation of perjury, and a host of financial irregularities now seen in a far more sinister light. The timing couldn't have been worse for Marcus. The emergency board meeting of Vail Industries, the one he had been desperately trying to push through to seize control of Alara's substantial shareholdings, was scheduled for 2 days' time. But the announcement of an active DA investigation, naming him as a primary subject, sent shockwaves through the board members. An emergency injunction, filed by Ben on my behalf, citing the investigation and Marcus's clear conflict of interest, was granted almost immediately. All attempts by Marcus to manipulate company assets or voting shares were frozen, pending the outcome of the investigation. His power play, the very foundation of his plan to silence me and seize my legacy, was stopped dead in its tracks. The timer hadn't just tightened, it had slammed a steel door shut in his face. The glare of the studio lights was almost blinding, a stark, unforgiving white that stripped away all shadows, all pretense. This was the arena Amelia Hayes had secured, against all odds and considerable pressure from Marcus's rapidly dwindling circle of influence. A live, primetime interview on a major news network billed as The Vail Confession, Truth or Deception. I sat composed. Ben, a reassuringly solid presence just off camera, his gaze steady on me. Across from us, separated by a sleek, minimalist table and the palpable tension that filled the studio, sat Marcus Vail. He looked diminished. The arrogant swagger was gone, replaced by a pallid complexion and eyes that darted nervously towards the cameras, then towards Chloe Thorne, who sat beside him, a silent, rigid statue of barely suppressed panic. Marcus hadn't wanted to be here. His lawyers had screamed against it, but Amelia Hayes, armed with the damning audio of his second call and the threat of releasing it exclusively if he didn't agree to a fair opportunity to respond, had backed him into a corner. His PR team, a new, less reputable agency he'd hired in a panic, had convinced him this was his only chance to reclaim the narrative, to project an image of a man wronged, a husband grieving his wife's tragic decline. Chloe's presence was unexpected, even to me. She had apparently insisted on accompanying him, perhaps believing her loyalty, her very presence, could somehow shield him or lend credence to their crumbling story. Or perhaps I mused with a flicker of dark satisfaction. She simply couldn't bear to let him face the music, or the executioner, alone. Amelia Hayes, now a rising star in the journalistic firmament thanks to her relentless pursuit of this story, began the interview with a calm, almost surgical precision. She recapped the events, the initial 911 call, the questions surrounding my mental state, the subsequent financial irregularities, and the allegations of dispatch log tampering. Then, she turned her gaze, sharp as polished steel, directly to Marcus. "Mr. Vail," she began, her voice even and professional, "the official dispatch logs from the night of your 911 call paint a picture of a concerned husband. However, as we've reported, a more detailed, forensically authenticated log from a secondary channel has surfaced. This log, Mr. Vail, shows your initial call detailing concern, but then it records a subsequent, previously unreleased call you made moments later from the scene, a call placed directly to Ms. Thorne, who is here with us tonight." Amelia paused, letting the weight of her words settle in the silent studio. "In that call, Mr. Vail, You are heard discussing the importance of making sure the narrative sticks. What narrative precisely were you referring to? Marcus visibly flinched. He swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. This, this is outrageous, he blustered, his voice a shade too loud. A tremor Ch low tried to hide by placing a trembling hand on his arm. My wife, Alara, was, and I say this with the deepest regret, extremely unwell. She was delusional, a danger to herself. I was trying to protect her, to get her help. That's the only narrative. Before Amelia could interject, my voice, calm and clear, cut through his agitated defense. I looked directly at him, my gaze unwavering. Unwell, Marcus? Or simply unwilling to be your victim any longer? The camera zoomed in slightly on my face. You speak of narratives, but the logs, Mr. Vale, the original logs, don't lie. And neither does the full audio of what you said that night. Chloe, seeing Marcus falter, jumped in, her voice shrill, defensive. He was under enormous stress. Anyone would be. He was trying to protect her, to protect your family's reputation from her episode. He might have said things, yes, but he was distraught. Amelia's focus shifted seamlessly to Chloe, her expression unrelenting. Distraught, Miss Thorne? Or was he giving you specific instructions? Instructions, for instance, about planting sedatives in Alara's favorite evening tea? Sedatives that would ensure her episode appeared convincing when the paramedics arrived? Because, Ms. Thorne, our sources indicate that the full forensic audio analysis of that second concealed call reveals precisely that conversation. Were you instructed to administer a substance to Ms. Vance without her knowledge or consent? The accusation hung in the air, poisonous and damning. Chloe's face went ashen. She opened her mouth, then closed it, her eyes darting to Marcus in naked appeal. Marcus surged forward in his seat, his face contorted with a mixture of fury and desperation. That's a vile fabrication, a slanderous lie. You can't prove that. That audio you're hinting at is inadmissible, doctored, faked. My lawyers will sue you. This network, everyone involved in this witch hunt. His voice cracked on the last word, the carefully constructed facade of the grieving husband shattering completely, revealing the cornered, enraged man beneath. This was the moment. I gave a almost imperceptible nod to Ben, who was already on his comms link to the studio's control room, a signal we had meticulously rehearsed. Perhaps, Mr. Vale, Amelia Hayes said, her voice dropping to a dramatic, almost chilling quiet. We should let the evidence speak for itself. And then it happened. On the large screens behind them, the ones that had been displaying the program's logo, a waveform appeared. The studio fell into an unnerving silence, broken only by the crisp, clear audio that suddenly filled the air, broadcast live to millions. It was Marcus's voice, not the feigned panic of the 911 call, but cold, precise, and utterly damning. The Earl Grey she drinks before bed, Chloe. Just enough to make her drowsy, confused. We need her compliant when they arrive. No fight left in her. Then, make sure they find the empty pill packets by her bedside, the ones I showed you, and the letter, the one in her handwriting I managed to acquire. The story has to be airtight. No mistakes this time, understand? Chloe's faint affirmative murmur was also audible. The audio snippet was short, no more than 30 seconds, but its impact was devastating. The screens then flashed a side-by-side comparison, the timestamp from the authenticated secondary dispatch log noting Marcus's call to Chloe, and the identical timestamp embedded in the forensic metadata of the audio file they had just heard. A perfect match. A stunned silence gripped the studio. Marcus stared at the screen, his face slack with disbelief, the color draining from it until he was a ghastly shade of gray. Chloe seemed to shrink into her chair, her eyes wide with a horror that was almost pitiable. A flustered studio aide, cued by the producer, walked stiffly onto the set and handed Marcus a bound document. He took it with a trembling hand, his eyes fixated on the cover. Forensic audio analysis and authentication report, Vale Thorne call recording, case file, hashtag DA749. Tangible proof delivered live of his utter ruin. The central question that had dominated headlines for weeks, Alara's sanity versus Marcus's deceit, was brutally, irrevocably resolved. There was no ambiguity left, no room for denial. Marcus Vale and Chloe Thorne stood exposed, their calculated cruelty, their conspiracy to defraud and destroy, laid bare for the world to see. Their shock, their horror, their guilt. It was all being broadcast live, a real time implosion of two carefully constructed lives built on lies. As Amelia Hayes began to expertly summarize the damning evidence, her voice a calm counterpoint to the chaos erupting in the online sphere, and no doubt in Marcus's and Chloe's rapidly imploding worlds, I saw movement at the edge of the studio, near the main exit. Two plainclothes police officers, accompanied by a woman in a sharp suit whom I recognized as a lead prosecutor from the district attorney's office, had entered quietly. They weren't rushing, they were simply waiting, observing. The camera briefly caught their presence before cutting back to Amelia. The next ARC seed was planted, silently but unmistakably. This televised confrontation was not the end, but a dramatic turning point. Their public indictment was complete. Their legal downfall was now only a matter of time. My fight for true justice, for the rebuilding of my life and the dismantling of Marcus's corrupt empire, was far from over. It was, in many ways, just beginning. But tonight, under the unforgiving glare of those studio lights, I had taken back my voice, my truth, and I had watched as their carefully constructed world burned to the ground, live on prime time. The studio descended into a controlled chaos the moment Amelia Hayes, with a final, pointed look at Marcus and Chloe, thanked her viewers, and the live feed cut to the network's shell-shocked main anchors. Their stunned faces, attempting to process the raw, televised demolition they had just witnessed, were almost comical. Studio managers rushed onto the set. Security personnel subtly but firmly began to close ranks around Marcus and Chloe, and the air buzzed with urgent, hushed conversations. Ben was instantly by my side, his hand briefly, reassuringly on my arm, his expression a mixture of triumph and professional concern. But my attention was elsewhere. Across the now cluttered stage, amidst the flurry of activity, Marcus Vale finally looked up. His face, once a mask of arrogant disdain, then horrified disbelief, was now eerily blank, stripped bare of all artifice. His eyes, hollow and haunted, found mine. They held a universe of ruin, of dawning comprehension of the abyss into which he had just irrevocably plunged himself and his accomplice. There was no defiance left, no anger, only the vacant stare of a man whose world had been methodically dismantled before his very eyes, before the eyes of millions. As he was gently but inexorably guided off the set by his remaining lawyer and a visibly stressed studio security guard towards the waiting police officers I had seen earlier, our gazes locked one last time. A small, chillingly calm smile touched my lips. His indictment wasn't just dialed, it was delivered, specials tonight, and broadcast to the world with no chance of appeal. The months that followed were a whirlwind of legal proceedings, depositions, and the slow, methodical untangling of Marcus's vast, corrupt network. The 911 deceit scandal, as the voracious media had gleefully dubbed it, became a national obsession. Marcus and Chloe, their assets frozen, their reputations in tatters, found themselves pariahs, facing a mountain of criminal charges ranging from conspiracy and fraud to perjury and obstruction of justice. The evidence, particularly the audio of that second damning call, was irrefutable. Their high-powered legal teams, one after another, found the case unwinnable, the public tide of opinion overwhelmingly against their clients. For me, it was a period of intense, often grueling, but ultimately healing reclamation. The psychiatric evaluations, now truly independent and thorough, swiftly cleared my name of any manufactured instability, declaring me sound of mind and a victim of profound psychological abuse and gaslighting. The legal battles to fully disentangle my finances and my company from Marcus's toxic grasp were complex, but with Ben's unwavering expertise and the weight of public opinion on my side, victory after victory was secured. 6 months after that televised confrontation, I stood on the expansive balcony of my reclaimed penthouse apartment, the one Marcus had so arrogantly assumed would be his. The city sprawled beneath me, a glittering tapestry of lights under a velvet star-dusted sky. It was a different view now, no longer seen through the lens of fear or betrayal, but with the clear, steady gaze of a survivor, a woman reborn not into another life, but into her own. finally free. Down below, the legal maelstrom continued for Marcus and Chloe. Their trials were set to begin, promising even more sordid revelations. They were broken, their empire crumbling into dust. Ben joined me, handing me a warm mug of the Earl Grey tea I now enjoyed without a trace of its former poisoned associations. He was no longer just my lawyer. He had become a trusted friend, a confidant, and now a partner in my newest venture. We had established the Phoenix Foundation, its mission to provide comprehensive legal, financial, and psychological support to victims of gaslighting, coercive control, and malicious frame-ups, a cause born from the ashes of my own ordeal. The fight had been brutal, the journey through the darkness harrowing, but this new dawn felt remarkably clean, imbued with purpose. I wasn't just reborn, I was rebuilt, forged stronger in the fires of betrayal, armed with a voice I would never allow to be silenced again. The scars remained, a testament to the battle, but they no longer defined me. They were merely a map of where I had been, not where I was going.